Hello and welcome to ILTV's Insider. I'm ILTV Editor-in-Chief Maayan Hoffman.
And I'm news editor Steve Leibowitz. You never know what to expect these days during the war in Israel. I went to sleep wondering if Israel would finally strike back and hit Beirut after absorbing nearly 300 days of attacks by Hezbollah that have badly damaged the beautiful and now deserted towns of northern Israel. The Druze did not leave Majd el-Shams, and they absorbed a horrific tragedy, children murdered on a soccer field.
But no, we did not wake up to reports of Beirut military targets in ruin. Instead, it was reports of far-right activists breaking into an IDF base where soldiers detained on suspicion of abusing a Palestinian detainee was being held for questioning. This after the right-wing mob stormed another base following the soldiers' arrests.
The anarchic scenes of mass break-in included several Knesset members from the ruling coalition.
Well, Steve, it's never a dull moment in this holy country. So I guess with that, we should actually get to this show and have it get started. And we are very fortunate to have two top guests in the studio today to talk about, well, all of these topics and more. Welcome, Olga Deutch, Vice President of NGO Monitor.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Of course. And Brigadier General Amir Avivi, the founder of Abitchonistim.
Pleasure being here. Thank you.
Given Hezbollah's significant military capabilities and the current volatile situation that Steve alluded to, what specific preparations is Israel undertaking to counter a potential full-scale conflict with Hezbollah in Lebanon? Or, honestly, Amir, should we go to all-out war?
Well, from day one, I've been saying that war in the north will happen at a certain point. I don't see any scenario where Hezbollah will withdraw voluntarily from South Lebanon. I hardly see a scenario where diplomatically there is a solution. There is no American leadership, no willingness to pose military threat on Iran or Hezbollah, no international pressure. And in order to bring back our 80,000 displaced citizens safely home, we need to push Hezbollah out of South Lebanon. And we also need to inflict severe damage to all their capabilities in all Lebanon. Without that, we might find ourselves in a reality where we bring back the people in a certain ceasefire, and 6 months later, we need to take them out again, because Hezbollah will shoot. So this is not something we can agree to. And the big question is the timing. When is the right timing? Because from the very beginning, the cabinet and the army said, we want to win first in Gaza, and then deal with the north. And we're reaching this point where we're dismantling Hamas to such a degree that the timing might be right for us in the coming weeks, maybe months, to deal with the north.
Right, you're saying around 50 to 60% of Hamas military capabilities have been eradicated and that it could be a matter of a couple of months. But if we do go forward and attack Hezbollah, there have been threats by Iran that they themselves would get involved in this war and potentially attack us, maybe not like in April, where we were prepared to stop those rockets. Do you believe that that could actually happen? And if so, what would that look like and what do we need to do to prepare?
So it might happen. We are already prepared. I mean, if they shoot rockets or UAVs at us, we are prepared. I think for them it's a big dilemma, because if they go into a full-scale war against us, I don't see in this scenario that the US will not intervene. And then this is a whole regional war. It's not a local war. So it's not an easy decision for Iran. And maybe it even will be for the best for us. We have to deal with their nuclear capabilities. And if they challenge us now, so this is the time to deal with this. And it will be done, I believe, with a coalition and not just Israel.
Well, best for us that we would go and we would attack Iran.
Yeah, we need to do that at a certain stage. It's better to do it with a coalition. The scenario I would like to see is us destroying Hamas, dealing with Hezbollah, and hopefully looking at the elections in the US, maybe in February, March, April, have a coalition and deal with Iran. But if Iran wants to attack before that, we'll have to deal with it, and this will be an historical opportunity for Israel to really destroy their nuclear capabilities and beyond their ability to produce oil, to export oil. What we did in Yemen is a small example of what Israel can do also in Iran. We can completely destroy their ability to sell oil. And this is something we can do very fast.
Amazing.
Look, I'm a lot older than everyone here, a lot older than all of you. Back in 1982, I was working in the Prime Minister's office in the first Lebanon war. It took about 20 days of cross-border shelling. At that time, it was from the PLO, Black September guys that were firing in until Begin said no more, headed toward the Beaufort, headed toward Beirut. I was actually in Beirut in those days. In 2014, it took one cross-border raid that killed Israeli soldiers, a tragic event, to send Olmert into a war. What will it take to attack Beirut, for God's sake? I mean, I've heard a lot of talk and a lot of posturing from our leaders, warnings over and over again. We have people out of their homes for close to 300 days. Why is Beirut still standing?
Is that to me?
Yeah.
You got it.
Take it away, Olga.
Go for
I
it.
think, I could give you a populist answer that would satisfy one side of the audience for sure. But I think in love and war, most of the things are in the 50 shades of gray. And I think the reality that we're living in is extremely complex. And just like the threat is not a monolithic threat, it's not a threat only coming from the Houthis or only from Gaza or only from Hezbollah, but they're actually attacking us simultaneously on all fronts at any given moment. And we probably missed an opportunity to respond immediately, which pushed us into a prolonged war, which is now a 10 months long war.
Meaning to respond immediately to Gaza, to Hamas.
Well, not to Hamas, to respond to Iran. We've known this for years, that everything that goes on in this region is just a proxy of Iran, right? We were the ones saying this for years now. What that has done is that has weakened the capacity of the people to be ready to sustain another round of rockets, evacuations, potential hostages situation, and so on. It has drained our army, but it also brought us to a political reality, and I think this is probably the most painful point, because probably there is a consensus in Israel. It doesn't matter who you ask, that we need to respond. But we cannot do this in a vacuum, and we have a vacuum or an absence of US leadership right now. And we have a vacuum of European leadership. So
let me ask this. General, we've been talking about total victory in Gaza for a long time. I've been saying it, you've been saying it, we've all been talking about it, and certainly we would like to achieve that. But right now, in terms of the strategic importance of the different fronts that Israel is facing, personally, I would say that at this point, the North is number one. Gaza, we've been fighting. I think today was the first day in almost 300 days of warfare. I couldn't find one bit of new information about the actual fighting on the ground in Gaza. And believe me, I search every day. Every other day I had. Today was maybe just a slow day because of the North. Where's the red line going to be drawn where we say, okay, the North has to be dealt with now, and then we'll come back to Gaza, not to mention Judea and Samaria?
I'm coming now from the Southern Command and really got a good picture of what's going on. We are on our way to total victory in Gaza. It will take time to dismantle all this infrastructure.
Until then, the North is going to absorb shelling. That's what you're saying.
Now, what I'm saying is that we are reaching a point where you can leave much less forces in Gaza to continue to degrade Hamas capabilities and move the center of gravity to the north. We need to control the timing. So when they consider now an attack in Lebanon, if we don't want immediately a full-scale war, you need to measure what you are going to do if you don't want to go to war now. If you want to go to war, it's not about a strike in Beirut, it's about a full-scale war. You need to control the timing.
What does a full-scale war look like?
Now the question is, do they want it now, this full-scale war, in a month? Or in 2 months,
but
or maybe in 3 months.
What does a non-full-scale war look like? Because if you're saying that we're going to have some retaliation, but we don't want it to lead to a full-scale war.
So the question they're asking themselves now is, what kind of retaliation won't bring a full-scale war?
Well, how many days does that take? Because, I mean, already the attack was on Saturday, and here it's Tuesday, and
well,
we basically
there are many considerations I cannot get into why they're waiting, but there will be a retaliation. It will be a very serious retaliation. But there are a lot of things that they need to take in considerations, including relevant intelligence and other things. But Israel is going to retaliate. But I think that really the strategic question is, when are we seriously going to deal with the North, meaning when are we going to war? And there is no solution for the North without a full-scale war. It's not the same goals as in Gaza. You cannot set a goal that says complete destruction of Hezbollah. We're not going to conquer all of Lebanon. But you can hit very, very hard Hezbollah, and you can take Hezbollah out of South Lebanon, meaning conquering South Lebanon. When the citizens of Israel will go back home and they will look north, they need to see Israeli soldiers, not Hezbollah, and for a very, very long time.
Well, I guess my question, though, is, I mean, we had a first Lebanon war, we had a second Lebanon war, and now we're talking about a third Lebanon war. I'm not as old as Steve, but...
Or the first Iranian war.
So that's...
I don't know what will...
Well, but I mean...
What we'll call it eventually.
But that is the question. I mean, if we go in and we do it again, what is to stop us from having a fourth Lebanon war? I mean, maybe Olga also talk about the vision of what this looks like, because, I mean, how do we achieve... You're saying push them back. Well, in a few years, won't they just be back on our border again?
By the way, again, because I'm older than everyone here, I remember back in the days when we actually had an alliance with the Christians. I actually attended peace talks between Israel and Lebanon in Naqoura, where we reached an agreement, signed an agreement, and then days later, Bashir Gemayel was blown up and killed. Yeah. But in any case, sorry.
Well, I think there's a military question, right? And that is a question of immediate deterrence and potential and security and safety of the state of Israel and its borders and its citizens. But if we're looking more strategically and long term, then it becomes a political and even a philosophical question. Who are our neighbors, right? Who are we dealing with? And as long as hate is the motive that prevails in their education and in their raison d'etre, right? And this is what guides them, then we don't stand a chance but to continuously go into one after another war, which is why I believe that, and there's a lot of talk about the day after and what that might look like, and I think that a lot of these discussions are actually pretty myopic right now, and they're predominantly focused on who's going to govern physically Gaza, right? Now, there's no question that Israel will have to have a huge say of what goes in, what goes out. There will be some sort of input by the international community and the Abraham Accord countries. But what does Gaza look like as a society in 50 years from now? And for that, we need to address a serious process of de-radicalization or re-education, uproot hate. It cannot be that in 50 years from now or 20 years from now, our neighbors still think that our mere existence here, regardless of the borders of Israel,
You're
is
saying
not
that
legitimate.
we need to be involved in the de-radicalization of Palestinian society.
We have to demand it.
Without occupying the territories and teaching them in their classrooms, you're saying that we can demand that as one of the considerations?
I don't think that we should teach them. I'm not talking about occupying or not. That's not, I'm just here representing a research organization. But I do think that when Israel sits around a diplomatic table, right, and states its demands for the day after, one demand has to be conditioning humanitarian aid. Who does it go to? I don't know if you know, but 1/3 approximately of the humanitarian aid goes to advocacy projects. Now, what are advocacy projects? Those are organizations that provide information to ICC. And based on this information, the ICC wants to issue arrest warrants against IDF and Israeli senior officials. It goes to ICJ, it goes to lobby governments to impose an arms embargo, and so on.
So, I mean, I guess the question is, though, when we just said in our government, the Knesset, we just voted or voting toward making UNRWA labeled as a terrorist organization. But the rest of the world does not align. They've started to refund UNRWA, right? So I guess my question for both of you really is this. And Amir, you and I have spoken about this. There's a bunch of one-state solution plans that have come out. There was one by former Ambassador David Friedman, one recently represented by Avivi, where they start to talk about this idea of de-radicalizing, only allowing Palestinians or Arabs in the country who say either, they've committed to not wanting to, let's say, annihilate the Jewish people in the state of Israel. But Amir, you told me that's impractical. I mean, so talk about, respond to Olga, because I don't know, how do you de-radicalize the population population? Isn't this just a war that's going to keep going?
In my book that was going to be published soon in English.
What's it called?
Excellent. What's your book?
What's the name of it?
No retreat.
No retreat.
In Hebrew, לא נשוב אחור.
Okay.
We're not going back, meaning we don't have the luxury to go back to the diaspora.
It's like the Springsteen
We need
song.
to make sure that this time we make it right. We stay here. Now, you know, when I wrote it 2 years ago, people say, what do you mean? I mean, we have a strong army, you know, strong country. Now everybody understands what I'm
It'll be
talking
very
about.
popular in
When I
English.
say that our existence here cannot be taken for granted, and we need to be proactive. So the way we should approach it is first answering the question, which the book tries to answer, what is needed to secure Israel for generations to come. We first need to talk about our existence. What are the parameters? What are defensible borders? What does it mean having a overriding security responsibility, as the Prime Minister is speaking now, even talking about Gaza? We cannot control intentions, but we can surely control capabilities. So we have to make sure that our enemies are not capable of harming us. Then we can talk about radicalization. There are many solutions to the question, how do we make sure that the Palestinian society doesn't have Israeli citizenship? While our national security needs are very rigid, when you talk about statecraft, it's almost endlessly flexible. You know, you look at Italy. Inside Italy, you have San Marino, you have Vatican, you have a state the size of a neighborhood inside the capital of another state, and it's a state.
You have Puerto Rico in the United
Puerto Rico.
States.
You have many examples, and this is all, I think, what Ambassador Friedman is talking about. We did in IDSF, we did an in-depth research looking at 66 different territories and states, all recognized formally by the United States as entities, formal entities, independent. All of them with a sovereignty that is very diminished. You know, no airspace or surrounded by another country, no army. So there are many solutions for that. But first we need to set the parameters of what is needed for us to exist, looking for generations to come. We don't know what will be the challenges in the future, but we do know that we are going to be a big country. You know, maybe in 25, 30 years, there will be 20 million citizens in Israel, maybe more. Looking at what's going on with the anti-Semitism, I think we are going to grow very fast. And we need to discuss this seriously, not from a political sense. Really, it's about values and looking in the long term. And I'm optimistic. I think there are solutions for this issue. And talking about deradicalization in Gaza, without Israeli presence inside Gaza, there will be no deradicalization. So I don't want to call it occupation and so on, but at the end of the day, even the states, in order to do the Marshall Plan in Germany after the Second World War, or in Japan, they occupied Germany for 4 years and Japan 6 years. You cannot do these processes if you are not on the ground dealing with this. Now, we're not supposed to educate with Israeli teachers in Palestinian schools, but we definitely need to be involved. We definitely need to bring international experts. We have to work with United Emirates, Saudi Arabia. There are many processes that are working well in other Arab countries that we can import to Gaza, but we do need to be involved if we want it to succeed.
So that was your optimistic message.
I'm always
Olga,
optimistic.
before we run out of time, Olga, I need to ask you, I guess, for your optimistic appraisal, if we could, because there is one
We always
really
like to end on a good note.
Well, there's something really, I think, positive that came out of this experience since October, and that is some of the Israeli NGOs that have done amazing jobs on the ground with the people. And then there are those NGOs that have really been harming us, causing damage to Israel. And then there are those, a couple of Jewish NGOs that are trying to prevent humanitarian aid from getting to Gaza and doing some other mischief on that side as well. Are they being watched as well by NGO Monitor?
Well, we watch all non-governmental organizations, NGOs, that are involved in any way within the context of the conflict. Right now, the focus is not only on the humanitarian aid. We focus on humanitarian aid because we follow the money. And then we can show how a lot of the political organizations are actually funded through governmental humanitarian aid funds. But most of them are actually active and seeking to hurt us politically. there's abundance of diversion of aid, and this is clear, especially after October the 7th. But we mainly focus on the physical diversion of aid, right? Helping Hamas build rockets, tunnels, abuse humanitarian infrastructures. But there's much less talk about what I call diversion of aid to politically support Hamas. And this is something that terror organizations, you can ask any counter-terror expert, have been abusing for decades.
Coordinated.
Yes, and it is also twofold. One side, you have organizations who try to internationally whitewash, if not romanticize, Hamas and other Palestinian terror by calling them combatants, armed wings, liberation soldiers, and so on. But on the other side, to continuously erode the legitimacy of any Israeli institution. Right now, it's IDF, right? Whether it's ICC, as we said, the International Criminal Court in The Hague, or the International Court of Justice in The Hague. But it is also, an organization like Amnesty International, who files a lawsuit against the Dutch government, asking it, or trying to get the court to prevent the Dutch government from providing U.S. F-35 components.
We have to finish, but before Maayan does the closure, I suppose you think it is a good thing that our prosecutors, the IDF prosecutors, are looking at cases very carefully when it's needed, because they'll need that in the ICC.
And I want to really leave the studio on a positive note. I think another really positive thing to me that happened after October the 7th is that hopefully the Jewish people here in Israel and around the world is a little clearer of who's out there against us. And hopefully we will know how to have less divisions moving forward.
Thank you.
Thank you. Well, unfortunately, we are out of time because this conversation could certainly go on forever. I really appreciate having our guests here today, both Amir Avivi and Olga Deutch. Thank you for joining us today. For more of the latest updates from Israel, make sure to subscribe to our newsletter at iltv.tv. Thanks for watching, Insider. Have a pleasant evening.